Hello, everybody. Would you believe it? This is Uncommon Sense number 98 on the road to 100. Only a couple to go with my great mate and co-host Dean Holmes. And today it's about the rise of the practice manager in firms. We are seeing this happening all over the place. Some might call it the practice manager. Some might call it the engine room of the firm. But today we're going to unpack the practice manager and why I guess today's financial planning firms can't grow sustainably without a strong practice manager. We're seeing the shift from admin heavy coordinators, Dean, to, I guess, strategic operational leaders. And this role is continuing to evolve. It's evolving alongside regulatory obligations, digital adoption, and client expectations. We've got it all. And no one better to kick off this conversation than a man who believes in this like nothing else himself. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dean Holmes.
Thank you, Craig. I'm shocked by the introduction and the preparation to get to that point, but really excited to go through this today. It's something that I've been talking to practices about, observing the great practices, what their best hire was or their most important hire was, and just calling out for all business owners that maybe your next hire is not an advisor. I think my LinkedIn post to get this pumped up was actually, don't hire another financial advisor until you watch this. This is what we're talking about, Craig, to kick us off.
Well, and it's an important one, right? So you and I have talked about a number of times the advisor, the CEO, and the business owner, and how a lot of the times there's one person wearing all three hats. Now, obviously, that's starting to evolve as firms get bigger. But I think we need to put that fourth one in there now. I think we need to be thinking about advisor, practice manager, CEO, business owner, and what role each of those play. And the big one, which I know you're very passionate about, is advisors should not be practice managers. If you've chosen to be an advisor, you need to be an advisor.
Absolutely. The question, if you sat down and ask it to yourself as a listener, but also just if you spoke to other advisors, is which bits of financial planning do you like? Predominantly, the vast majority of advisors fall on the fact that they love meetings. They love helping clients. They love talking to clients. They love being in client meetings. And that's all good. And when you're an employed advisor, you're very likely to be able to do that. When you move into self-employed world, you end up having to split a fair bit more time into the second category, which is, as you said, business owner, practice manager, CEO type of activities. And so what we're really focused on, Craig, is making sure that if you are the advisor in your business that wants to spend more and more time in advisor meetings, then we need the support network around you to be able to deliver what you promise in those meetings. And a practice manager is the person that is going to help you deliver on everything you say in the meetings. And as I believe it, let you have 50% more meetings as a result. And everyone can do the maths on that in terms of, if Dean's right, you can have 50 more clients as a result because you've got a practice manager. Then that's a scalable business from where you are today. Adding a second advisor does not scale your business. It doubles the costs, and maybe the revenue will double in 4 years' time.
Not to mention, Dean, where are you going to find the second advisor?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Good luck with that. And it's, new advisors, it just moves the problem around. So if I hire an advisor today, they move from an existing practice. So that existing practice has the problem and they have to hire an advisor from another firm. So as everyone knows, we're not making enough advisors and we're not making enough advisors, I would say, for the next 10 years. And so if you believe what I believe, you can't find advisors. So you need to hire a practice manager and pay them like an advisor in order to grow your business.
I think it's important to note, Dean, though, that you and I are still 100% behind PYs and growth and new advisors coming into the industry. What we're saying is right now it's actually really hard to find that next advisor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great PYs are inside firms doing their development and getting ready for a particular role that they need. It's already been made. We are still very much behind the future of the growth of advisors. It's just they're hard to get right now.
Absolutely hard to get.
What I'd like to do now, mate, is perhaps throw at you different key responsibilities that the practice manager perhaps should have, and maybe we unpack them a bit as to how deep or not deep they should go with those. So the easy one to start with is probably operations and workflow for the business.
Yep.
Probably one of the most challenging ones as well. The right practice manager with the right skill set will be able to, no doubt, build this strategy, build this process, build the workflow, get it done. But how do they get everyone on board? And
Yeah,
how much time should they spend on this?
correct. And so the first thing that happens if you're bringing in the practice manager above existing staff in terms of the organizational chart, the challenge becomes the answer to this question, which is, who is my boss? So when the practice manager arrives, typically it's not going to be your first hire. So you might have some VAs, you might have a couple of client service people, and then you realize with the growth, and you listen to this podcast, that you need the practice manager. And so what we need to do in terms of the operation is make everyone understand and get clear in the advisor's head as well, and the business owner's head, who is the boss of certain staff, who do they report to? And that starts to build how the engine room's going to operate, Craig. This person is absolutely an operational person in that they know and understand the financial planning process. Hopefully they know and understand X-Plan really well, or insert other product there. And they really understand clients as well. So they have spoken to clients before, probably as a CSO, they're going to talk to clients again. But this operational focus is where they're going to spend most of their time to make this boat go faster, to make the advice journey from start to end close quicker. We have a concept of like engagement to ATP. So then, when did the client sign the engagement agreement? When did they sign the authority to proceed? How many days was that? And so that's a thing that should be shorter and shorter over time if this business boat is going faster. So operations is a key, and then knowing who all the people are reporting to over time is very important.
Yeah, fantastic. On that, I was going to go to a different subject next, but let's go, because you've opened up the people thing. Let's go to people and culture.
Yep.
Should the practice manager have direct reports and be responsible for people and culture? Or should that be the CEO? Or who should have that, and where should it land? And it's probably a bit of an open question depending on the person you have.
It depends on the person you have and the size of the company. And so what if we think about, we'll talk about people first, then culture. So when I think about the people side of it, the staff within the business should definitely report to the practice manager. Okay. The practice manager is the one that's on the ground, seeing everything that's going on, and not in any client meetings. So they're actually going to be pretty good as the manager. Okay. In terms of day-to-day operations, the practice manager is going to run all of that, give all the feedback, manage all the workflow. In terms of people and performance in the context of performance reviews and understanding what's motivating all of the staff and getting the staff's voice on the table as well, I think that's a joint meeting between the practice manager and the business owner or CEO, depending how big the company is. But that's a joint meeting, because staff should always have a line of sight to someone that's a level above as well, in order to be heard and to be motivated to stay working at that company. When it comes to the advisors, the one that I like is slightly controversial, is that the seat of the advisor, or the role of the advisor, probably does report to the practice manager as well, which is a bit crazy, but they're running all the workflow. They're the ones that, if you need to get something done quickly, you're going to talk to the practice manager. If something's going wrong with a client, you're talking to the practice manager. So there's a bit of the advisor now starting to go, I report to the practice manager as well, because I need to keep them really well informed about all the things that's going on in my business unit or my client book. Same strategy though, Craig, is that the advisor is going to have their performance review meetings with the practice manager and the CEO at the same time. And so this, as we're painting this picture, we see how important this role becomes. When we land on culture though, culture comes down from the absolute top, wherever the top is. So that's the shareholders, the CEO, the main advisor if it's a smaller practice. And culture is something that has to be built and reinforced from the top down. So you can't have someone halfway down creating culture and then pushing it up and down in the organization.
Yep.
That comes from the CEO or the most senior person in terms of setting the culture. the practice manager, as they get more confident, will give you feedback to allow you to be a better CEO and change that culture over time or reinforce the right activities. But the reality is that message is heard from the top. It doesn't get heard as well by all the staff if it's coming halfway.
Yeah. And so then the next one, mate, like compliance and governance. There's this great business I know, you might know them, it rhymes with Absolute Wealth Advisors. And their practice manager, though, is strong with this in terms of
Mm,
coordinate, even though they're with a licensee. So technically there's an overlay there. But the part of their job that they do around this seems to still like even preparing people for their reviews and making sure policies are followed and all that kind of thing.
mm.
Seems like a really nice critical one because what it does is it gets that kind of cloud nice and clear and blue skies on that for the firm.
Yeah, yeah. And so we can talk a little bit about what the outcome of this practice in terms of having a practice manager that is focused on this side of it. And the context is that there's a hell of a lot of change for a financial advisor to actually be across. And so the role of the financial planner, obviously, we have to be across all of the legislation, financial advice required stuff. So there's a whole lot of work about that. And then there's the work of which is running being a licensed advisor, what's coming down from the AFSL or what's coming, if you're self-licensed, you're trying to do this yourself as the advisor, which is dangerous enough, that all of this AFSL related obligations. And so there's an ever changing buzz one at the moment, which seems to be anti-money laundering. Honestly, I have no idea what the changes are that's coming, but should the financial advisor be across what's going on with the AML in detail, or should the practice manager get into the detail on behalf of the entire business, understand what the change is,
Mm.
devise the solution, and then communicate that to the advisors? And that, as an example, is what a compliance focused practice manager is going to do for the organization. Is it's actually going to take some of the noise away from the advisors so they can focus on being advisors. Another example is our like compliance audits, for example, that gets project managed by the practice manager, not the advisor. So the advisor doesn't have to go through, find their files and emails and all that kind of stuff and put it in one spot for the compliance. That is a job that we've put into the practice manager role so that the advisors have a chance of spending more time in client meetings, which is revenue generating and client service related, which means that we're going to have happier clients and more clients over time.
Yeah, lovely. And mate, one that's come up this week in a couple of conversations for me with advisors is I really want to start to nail my client experience. I think it's good, but I want it to be great. And I'm a practice manager could obviously play a really important role in helping develop and guide and manage the client experience too, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's the reality is you can't manage the client experience if you're in meetings all the time,
Yep.
because the client meeting is where you're in charge of the client experience. Everything else, the business is in charge of the client experience. So the reality is that you're going to deliver this amazing meeting. You're relying on the business and the team to run what the client feels like thereafter. And so one of the simple activities by me of drawing out what the client journey is in a straight line, understanding who's doing those jobs, and then understanding who's responsible for making that an enjoyable experience. Because I can
Yep.
get you to sign a third party authority, and there's two different ways that I can get you to sign the third party authority. One of which is annoying, admin heavy, and you make me print it out and wet signature, et cetera, et cetera. And the other is a digital experience, which is much more engaging. And so the the only way to implement that in your business is to have other people in your business helping you do that. And predominantly that's the practice manager, because the practice manager is able to lead the rest of the people to make those changes over time. You can't make the changes because you're in a client meeting.
And I think too, Dean, like with client experience, think outside the square. One of my favorite firms in Australia, and I'm not going to mention who they are or anything like that, but their office concierge, the
Mm,
person most critical to client experience, has a PhD in psychological sciences and a Bachelor of Science in psychology. This person's a doctor.
Yep.
They have a doctorate and they're the office concierge for this firm because it is the most important role of first impression and client experience. And what better person than someone who really understands people to
Absolutely.
make that work? And so it's just looking outside the square and going, what do I need from these functions and how do I make them
Mm.
work?
And a good practice manager, one, like, I know that this is public, but the Pivot Wealth's practice manager, she's now the business manager. Like, she was a client. So she had the client experience, when Pivot Wealth's amazing, I want to work for you, and then became like Ben's first employee in the ops side to help build that out. And so that was a different context in her experience, and she had zero, as far as I know, zero financial planning experience, but knew what they wanted to build as a great client experience through that process, and then had the people in the business overall to make it a reality.
All right, so let's shift now. So you've got a practice manager in. They're operationally looking after the business. They've set up a great client experience. They're doing all these things. They've got the advisors humming, compliance is going well, all of that kind of thing. Does the practice manager actually then need to become a strategic partner?
Yes. So what you mean by that is, should the practice manager know your business plan?
Yeah, should they
Um,
work with the
yeah.
principal on short and long-term goals? Should they be part of driving pricing reviews, capacity modeling, cost to
Absolutely.
serve, all that stuff?
Absolutely. So your practice manager is then like the 2IC of this organization. It doesn't matter how big or small it is, but the reality is that the advisor and the owners can't do everything. And so you need to bring people on the journey with you as to your business plan first and foremost. Like, you
Yeah.
can't sit in isolation, create a business plan, and then not tell anyone about it and get frustrated that you're not achieving it. The reality is that your whole business plan needs to be communicated at different levels of detail throughout your whole company. So this culture comes from the top down, direction or strategic vision of the whole company comes top down. Bringing the practice manager into your coaching meetings, like with me, I have business managers in the coaching meetings all the time. Sometimes I coach the practice manager only, not the owners of the company.
Yep.
But having that practice managers coming along to the meetings is really valuable, so that the staff can see and hear, that practice manager can see and hear what's going on at the business level, get ideas from that process, but then, Craig, help the advisor or business owners execute on that strategy, because it's a business strategy, not an individual strategy. And the reality is you can't do it alone. So bringing them into the tent in terms of the strategic plan, showing them and helping them help you set the quarterly priorities, and then empowering them to work towards completing those priorities is really important. And that journey is really important. The reality is you don't have time to do it very well, because I'm trying to put advisors in client meetings. And so therefore, this is a person that will do the work and check it with you over the quarter.
I think too, Dean, we're seeing lots of M&A going on with firms, obviously, and how critical the practice manager role is too, if there's an M&A project on, in terms of embedding that into the business and looking after the
Well,
new advisors that might come with that M&A and process system. It's incredible.
it's really important. So everyone, generally speaking, wants to do an acquisition. The reality is that the lessons that you learn from the integration is really important. And it's just a capacity question that we have at that point in time as well, Craig. And we might sound like a broken record, but if you buy a practice, the advisor has to go and meet all of those clients. The bringing the integration in of merging the X plan, making sure the product stuff's all coming across, making sure the client data's there, making sure the clients know who their new advisor is, and that communication. The advisor can't do that on their own. Like, I know in acquisitions that we've done, we've been more successful with them because we've had people that are working in the company that aren't seeing clients. And that's the difference. Someone that's the practice manager can work for you for 40 hours a week, plus or minus, and not have to go into any client meetings, which is really valuable. The other thing advisors say, Craig, is I'd be really efficient if I didn't have any clients. or if I didn't have to go to client meetings. And it's the same thing. There's a lot, you can get a lot of work done in a week without client meetings. And that's what your practice manager is doing for you each and every day and week for you.
Yeah. And mate, the one I'd like to just talk about for a moment, and I see this in firms that we work with that do have practice managers, but just the human side of it and why actually the practice manager is really critical to overall advisor well-being. I think they're obviously, and you've touched on some of these points as you've explained some of the roles and things, but really a really good practice manager can actually reduce advisor burnout because they take that operational and that compliance strain array away from them because they've set something in place, and then the advisor knows, as long as I see the people and follow the process the practice manager's put in place, then we know everything operationally is working. We know our governance is good and strong. But I think also they're a really good, and if you're a firm with say 3 or 4 advisors already that's flowing, they're a really good sounding board for those advisors as well. There's problems to solve. Sometimes there might be some mediation that needs to occur. So they're good. The good ones I've seen are really great at that too. And also just supporting that really positive, productive workplace. If it's all humming and functioning like that, then I think this role of the practice manager that we're clearly strongly advocating for can really help with the human side of the business as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the moment you move from one advisor to 2 advisors in your practice, the things that happen is that those 2 advisors do things slightly differently, which the practice manager can coordinate back to one way, a consistent way of operating first and foremost. The practice manager is seeing all of the advice that's coming through and out the door. So as a business owner, you know that there's more likely to be consistency across advisors when the funnel of 4 advisors is going through one checking process. So we know we've got consistent advice, which this is really important just to make sure. If you've got 10 advisors, it's really hard to know what 10 advisors are advising on at any one time without a system. So that's a really good thing. The sounding board of making sure that they're mentally okay in terms of understanding their product, understanding how they're going, productivity, health-wise, is something that the practice manager is seeing because they're in their world each and every day. If you're the business owner, you don't see as much of this because you're off doing client meetings and other things in order to grow the business. So Craig, what do you think can go wrong with hiring a practice manager? We'll play the devil's advocate. Why shouldn't we have a practice manager? Or what's the things that will go wrong that we should be aware of?
So let me start with, does your firm actually need one? Because sometimes people overemploy and then you've just got too much inside an ecosystem in terms of having a practice manager. The wrong type of person is obviously, I know that's an oxymoron, but it can go wrong. So let's say culturally they're not good. They might be operationally excellent, but don't have the other skills that they could bring with it. And so that could just sink the business where everyone's unhappy and they're not feeling like they're comfortable being bossed around, if you like, or pushed and prodded and stuff. I think if the practice manager doesn't have from the business owner clearly defined goals and KPIs and what we want you to achieve and what we want you to do, then things could go off on tangent and we could just see everything actually become over-engineered rather than smooth and efficient and effective. And I guess the ultimate thing of all of those things added up is you could start to lose other quality people that were already inside the firm because of it.
Yep, absolutely. And
Name a few.
Just to name a few, yeah, and they're good to be aware. Good to be aware of because you're bringing this as becomes a senior hire in your company, and so it's that does result in change because the 2 advisors, employee and owner, or however it was, they were doing everything, and bringing this person in can create some tension along the way. So that's really important to be thinking about. The other thing that I wanted to raise, Craig, is just the concept of change fatigue. And when you have someone that's able to work full time on the operations of the business, both getting stuff done and making changes along the way, the business can get overwhelmed. All staff, doesn't matter where they are, the business can get overwhelmed with the amount of change. So we've got to be concerned or considered around this just to make sure that we know what kind of change is coming down the line. We have a really good idea of how it's being rolled out and the staff feel comfortable, most likely because they know the business strategy, they feel comfortable with this change. The change for change's sake, or we're now using green pens instead of red pens, and change doesn't add value, but it confuses. That's something that can happen when people want to put their mark on the business kind of thing. And so just being aware of this as the practice business owner, just being aware of the changes that might be happening and the impact that can have on the team overall.
Yeah. And two extra things on that, Dean, is one, if you decide you need a practice manager role, recruit the role. Don't just say because Dean here has been in operations in the firm for the last 10 years, we're just going to make him the practice manager. You will 100% fail if Dean doesn't have the skill set for the practice manager. And then as the business owner, you need to ask yourself the question, am I delegating responsibility without delegating the power? And what I mean by that is you want the PM to you're going to run the business, but then the business owner still overrides them every single day. And so there's mixed messages in the firm, and then there's chaos. And so the PM, I guess the practice manager in that thing becomes responsible for stuff, but they're not empowered, and then everyone's confused and it just isn't good.
Yes, correct. That's when the concept of there's too many people in the leadership team that it just, the messages are wrong and it doesn't work. And if you practice manager makes a decision, then gets overruled next week, publicly or privately, it just doesn't get the outcome through that process.
Yeah,
Okay?
and
I think it's
don't
like that
create
thing of
key person risk.
Correct. Too many cooks spoil the broth is what is the reality, is that if you've got too many people driving that side, we get in trouble. Cool. Completely agree there, Craig. So the last question in terms of where do you find these people and what do you pay them kind of thing as well. And so the first question of like, where do you find them? Where are they hiding at the moment, do you think, in business?
Really tough one, isn't it? There's probably some hidden gems out there sitting in probably roles that are more operational and they've got this skill set, but they just haven't been able to let it out. So, yeah, it's a tough one, Dean. I can't come up with something beautiful for you. Succeed.
No.
Are they paraplanners that want to go into more leadership, strategic thinking roles? Are they operations people? They could be licensee staff where they've been working in operations and all that type of thing. And
Kouimanis is applying for a job, ladies and gentlemen.
Make me your COO.
But no, you're exactly right. No, unless you're hiring a practice manager that's currently a practice manager into the role, then you've got to find someone that has two of the three kind of experience backgrounds to then be able to mold that person. And don't get me wrong, you're still mentoring and molding the practice manager when they arrive. They're not finished when they arrive in your business, but you can choose the sleeves of experience. Someone that's coming from paraplanning hopefully understands like the compliance world of that as well. So you can choose that area. You can choose a senior like client service person, potentially this person knows and understands the entire financial planning operation, and I'm going to promote them into the practice manager so they can do everything else. As you say, Greg, you get someone from licensee or operations of an AFSL or back offices, they're going to know the financial planning process relatively well and the compliance process relatively well, and then you teach for the other components. So definitely you're not going to, just like advisors, maybe excellent practice managers are also like unicorns, but I think you can get some of the experience into the business from one person and then teach and empower to fill that gap in terms of moving up to be and taking the role of the practice manager.
Maybe too, Dean, you need to just stop, take a breath, have a look what's going on in your own business. They could be hiding right under your nose, and you just need to formalize the role that someone's already doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's a interesting point in terms of formalizing the role means that you've written a job description and a salary range. And so the salary range, in all honesty, is huge in terms of where their experience is and what they're capable of doing over time. But I would leave you with the thought in terms of the practice manager is that there's a growing likelihood that they should be paid very similar to financial advisors. So if you think about it, if a practice manager is going to help you see 50% more clients, that's worth it from an economics perspective. 50% more clients is $500,000 to $600,000 of additional revenue. If one person can help you bring that into the organization and you pay them to $150,000 of that 500,000, there's still a lot left over for the business owner. And so definitely thinking that this role is a senior experienced role, and therefore it does need the salary to match that as well.
What a great way to finish, Dean. That was number 98 of Uncommon Sense, the rise of the practice manager. If you're a practice manager out there and listening and want to come on and join me, Dean, as a guest in the new year, look at that. We're now looking for guests for the new year, Dean.
Yep.
In the new
We've
year,
also therefore agreed to do episode 101. So
we have. There we go. We're now on the hook. For those that dislike us, we're sorry about that. We're not going anywhere. But for those who are loving it and following along, we appreciate you as always. But that was number 98, Dean, on the road to 100.
Thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.